Exclusively on Secular Media Network, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello and welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto, your source for news, commentary, discussion, and debate at the intersection of the atheist movement and the LGBT rights movement. I'm your host, Callie Wright, and today we're talking about the fellas. We're going to have a discussion with two men that I'm close to about their experiences with masculinity and how expectations surrounding masculinity have affected the way they navigate the world. Our guests today are Hugh and my friend Will. Hugh's been on the show before. He's a cis gay man and is someone I met through the online atheist community and the podcasting community, and someone I've grown very close to and someone I love very much. My friend Will is a gay transgender man who I met through being involved in the local transgender community here, and is also someone who is very, very dear to me. All right, Hugh and Will, welcome to the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Hello, Callie.
Thank you.
So Hugh has been on the show before, as we know. He's a gay guy. He's a atheist community friend, at this point, sort of family member. Met at ReasonCon, and he's just awesome, and I love him a lot. And Will is a trans man, also a gay man, who's a friend of mine from the community here and someone I love a lot. So I figured I'd just have both of you on to talk about your experiences surrounding, manhood, masculinity, and how, and how those things sort of color how you navigate the world. So, Will, let's talk, let's start with you. If you could just tell me a little bit about you and kind of your story.
Oh, that's a big question.
You've got 30 seconds, go.
Oh, God. I am a gay trans man. So, yeah, that definitely has a big impact on how I live my life. A little bit about me. 22, I've been medically transitioning since I was 20. I started hormones when I was 20, but I've been kind of socially living as male since I was 17-ish. And it definitely is a game changer when you are perceived as male by society, and then being perceived as a gay man was definitely kind of jarring and not something I kind of knew how to deal with, and I did not anticipate how hard it was going to be, which is probably impacted by the fact that I didn't know I was a gay man until after I started transitioning, so it was all very confusing.
And what about Hugh? Hugh, tell me a little bit about your background for those who may not remember, may not have heard the episode you were on before.
I am in my late 40s. I grew up a Southern Baptist preacher's kid and struggled with my sexuality for quite some time. Sought as much as possible to conform and to be a straight man. In fact, it was a choice. I chose to be a straight man. And in my early 30s, in my early 30s, I realized that as hard as I wanted to make it a choice, it was not. And slowly over a bit of time became comfortable in my own skin. And in my late 40s, it's a good life.
Awesome. So Will, you talked earlier about how things change when people start to actually perceive you as male. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Mm-hmm. So one of the biggest ways that being perceived as male by other people changed how I live my life is that I, in turn, began to take my own gender identity a little more seriously, and it's not something I'm super thrilled about, but I think it is a fact that when you are validated by your environment, you just feel more confidence in your own knowledge of who you are. it also definitely got a little harder. The expectations that 2015 America has on men are not things that I can or have any desire to live up to, and that's really intimidating. That I did not expect to be so intimidated by how the world in general kind of expected me to be. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and Hugh, as a cis gay man, do you feel the weight of those expectations too?
As you know, as a cis gay man, I think that I struggled for quite some time, figuring out how I fit into the big scheme. My story was a long journey to arrive at being comfortable. I can go back into my childhood, and there were certainly expectations of being raised. Let's put away the Southern Baptist preacher's kid and just move into the fact that I grew up a white male in the South. And as an adult, I learn and I understand from a sociological standpoint all of those Southern white male expectations, the myth of machismo. Southern white men are supposed to be tough and are supposed to go out and work for the family, and they prove their manhood by fighting and not taking crap off of anyone. And it's this whole myth of a Southern white male machismo, and I did grow up with that, and that was what I saw modeled in my family. Fortunately for me, and by the way, I was not, a kid that you could run around and instantly say, oh, he's a gay kid. I don't want to say I conformed, because I'm not so sure. And gender it's really hard to define. I'm not so sure that I conformed with gender expectations, or if this is just who I am. And at this point in life, I don't feel like I'm conforming. I feel like this is just who I am. Over the years, this is who how my journey wound up. Backing up to the childhood, I was, however, an artistic child. I was an intellectual, so I was one of the nerdy kids, and I was pretty sensitive. I always had a sense of empathy for others, and to this day, I can walk in a room and can feel how other individuals feel. And of course, those characteristics are not associated with this Southern machismo perspective. And so I did not conform as a child to that. Fortunately, my stepfather, who is my father in my heart, was this really tough man's man who was as sensitive as they come, who would cry watching movies. To this day, when he prays the prayer, and yes, I conform definitely when I'm at home with that. And he always reaches a point of mentioning the troops as a Vietnam veteran. He cannot say, and God be with our troops without crying. So fortunately, I had that image of manhood modeled for me. And that was in my adolescence, I was validated with that being manly, and he validated that.
Gotcha. And so, Will, growing up seeing all of these ideas about what masculinity should be, quote unquote, and, growing up as, someone who everyone around you thought that you were just a girl, and, knowing yourself that wasn't the case, did you internalize those messages about masculinity, and did you feel pressure, like, well, since I'm actually a guy, I need to go out and I need to fit these stereotypes? Like, was there any sort of pressure to do that?
Oh, absolutely. And so I have two things, two responses to that. One, when you said growing up and everyone perceiving me as female, so the understanding that I had of masculinity and maleness was so, you don't question it. It was just so factual to me that I did not even begin to question my gender identity until I was a teenager. There was not even an option. Of course I could not be male. Like, I was far too interested in what was pretty and not wanting to play in the dirt and do, stereotypical quote unquote boy things. It just, the fact that, I think it's important that that it was so, we don't challenge it ever. So I didn't even consider the fact that that could possibly be the reason behind all my depression and discomfort. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then when you said about being for the pressure, once I did come out and socially transition, it was incredible. I think a part of it was impacted by the fact that I was, 19. I was in college. I was hanging out with early 20s dudes, and I was out to them as a trans man, and they kind of took it upon themselves to, I think in their way, they were being supportive. Looking back,
they were trying to make you a man, quote unquote.
It felt more like they were being mean to me, but I think they were actually that was their way of being helpful. So yeah, they were really trying to help me man up, and it was not fun, and I was miserable, and I felt so bad about myself, and I was, I was pretty much, I thought, I have to be sexist and misogynistic and homophobic, and well, this is not who I am, and then I realized I was gay, and it was like, oh God, that was a whole other thing I had to try to make sense of. So getting away from those influences and meeting people who were comfortable with different definitions of masculinity was wonderful and very helpful for me.
Okay, so let me ask this. So what I was kind of trying to get at in the previous question is when those things were going on, when, those guys that you were hanging around with were trying to help you, quote unquote, man up. I mean, did you go through a period where you thought that was a legit thing? Like, I actually, I actually have to do this because if I'm a guy, this is what I have to be. Like, or was it always like, they're doing this thing, this doesn't seem right, I don't know about this?
Oh, I see. No, there was definitely a period where I totally bought it. I accepted it. I embraced it. I tried to make it my persona, my personality. It was, yes, I absolutely took it seriously at one point. And I'm not proud of that person that I was. I don't think I was a very nice person.
Gotcha. And so Hugh, you were talking earlier about how you grew up with a more soft sort of version of masculinity being modeled for you, which is awesome. I think we could all do with more of that. So struggling with your sexuality, was there a time that you questioned your manhood because of it? Like, I can't really be a man if I'm gay.
For me, that was never, no, absolutely not. And I do need to make sure that I show the balance. We have my father that I grew up with who modeled for me this overly manly image of what manhood was. And, and I did not quite fit into that. And I struggled with that. And then around the age of 13, 14 is when the stepfather came in and modeled for me how I think men, how I think men should be. Now, to answer your question about, was there a point in struggling with my sexuality that I struggled with my manhood? And no, I have always felt like a man. I am, fully and happy in my body. are there a gazillion things I would love? Would I like bigger biceps? Yes. Am I willing to go to the gym to make it happen? No. So, it comes down to what you're willing to put into it. So, I think all of us, have body issues, but I do recall, someone asking me, early on, I was probably, I don't know, it was many years ago. Someone asked me, well, who is the man and who is the woman in the relationship?
Oh God, that's the worst.
And of course, my response was, we are both men. If
That's
I
the
wanted
point.
to be with a woman, that is an option. I want to be with a man, and I am a man. And to me, being gay is when a man is in love with a man, and that's what being gay is. So
Right.
there is no woman in the relationship. There is no man role in the relationship. It's about two men who love each other. Now, within that, I want to back up and say that, I think in my younger years, I was a little less comfortable with gay men who were more effeminate, with gay men who did not fit my stereotype of what a man should be. And I reached a point where I realized I am expecting the world to make room for me, just like I am. And I can expect that of the world if I'm not willing to do it myself. And I reached a point where I understood that my definition of what being a man is and my definition of what being gay of loving someone in a same-sex relationship absolutely does not conform to many people's perspective. So that was an epiphany where I woke up and I realized, wow, I don't conform to others, and I've got to make room for those who don't conform to my expectations. So, at this point in my life, I just say, the planet's big enough for all of us. We just got to take enough time to make room for everyone, and there really is room for everyone.
I hear that.
Quick summary, I do expect you to make room for me.
Yeah.
The balance is I owe you making room for you as well.
And we are going to take a quick break. We will be back with more with Hugh and Will on the Gaytheist Manifesto.
Get in on the conversation. Join us at facebook.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto.
I'm Daniel Radcliffe, and I believe that reaching out for help is the bravest thing a person can do. If you are struggling and need support, call the Trevor Lifeline at 1-866-488-7386. It's free and confidential, and trained counsellors are there to listen 24/7 without judgment. To learn more about the Trevor Project's life-saving work for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender or questioning young people, go to thetrevorproject.org.
Before we jump back into the show, it's time to thank our patrons. Thank you so much for believing in us enough to contribute to us financially and for being a part of this movement. Patrons of the Gaytheist Manifesto have access to all sorts of cool stuff, like a big shout out on the show, premium content, including an audio journal I've decided to keep documenting the more personal stuff I don't dive into on the show, and an exclusive patrons only hangout once a month. If you're so inclined, head over to patreon.com/The Gaytheist Manifesto to become a part of this movement and support the show. Thank you. And so, Will, talk to me about that. Since we're talking about sexuality too, you mentioned that you didn't really come to terms with your own sexuality until after you'd come to terms with your gender identity, and that's actually an experience that's pretty similar to mine, but obviously going the other direction. So, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that kind of coincided with the pressures of masculinity in general. I remember I had a friend who was a trans man, and he said something like, after he transitioned medically, he realized he was gay or something. And I remember thinking, that is like the worst thing that could possibly happen. Oh my God, what if like I start T and then I become gay? Oh my God, like that was my biggest fear. And now it's just kind of hilarious.
What I mean, in your head, like, what did you think was bad about that? It was like internalized homophobia, or
that is. You'd think I would know the answer to that. That is a pretty good guess. I think that's likely.
Yeah.
I think I just desperately wanted to be accepted, and I think maybe I just realized that adding another minority status to myself would just make it that much harder,
Gotcha. You just wanted to be a normal guy, quote unquote.
Yeah. I remember, like, before I started T, I was like, oh, I'm never going to tell anyone I'm trans after I transition. I just want to be a guy, and now that's, out the window. I don't want to live my life like that. But yeah, so it was, there just came a point when I just realized I realized I was being kind of homophobic, and I needed to let myself consider that possibility. And kind of after that, there was kind of no going back.
Will and Callie, let me jump in.
Yeah.
I do know there was a period in my probably my early 20s or so when I was exploring my sexuality, and it was very important to me that that I not be recognized as gay. So, within the whole spectrum, I think that there was some internalized homophobia. I did not, there was a time in my life where I just do not notice, do not figure out that I'm gay. I want that to be my secret. I wanted to just conform with society. So that's a part of the journey as well.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I had a similar struggle. I mean, I don't know if it was, internalized homophobia or if it was just like I wasn't ready to deal with it. But I mean, the same kind of thing when I didn't figure out my sexuality until after I came out, and I'm still in the process of figuring it out. I guess that's kind of an extended journey. So why don't you guys lead the conversation for a second? Because I'm a big fan of saying, like, you shouldn't dictate to other people what their experiences are. So instead of having me lead the conversation, is there anything that either of you think that is important, to point out about, being a guy, being a trans guy, being a gay guy?
There is something that has really, really impacted my life as a gay trans man. That is the hesitation that cis gay men can have to even just have a friendship with me as a gay trans man. I think that, when you want to be friendly with someone who shares your experiences, and then I've made friends with gay guys, and then I think they realize I'm trans, or I come out to them, and then they just pull away. And that is kind of disheartening. That has definitely.
Why do you think that happens?
Mm-hmm. Well, like, I think that there's very lots and lots of possibilities depending on the person. I think maybe it could just be they may have the mindset of, oh, you're trans, so. Like, I mean, I remember when I identified as a straight man, someone said, oh, okay, so you're lesbian. Like, people are just so confused. They just,
oh, God.
It's just not worth it to try to interact. I know, I was like, really, or maybe it's just, my experience is not like most, I cannot relate to the experiences of many cis gay men, and that bums me out sometimes. But, I didn't have, the growing up, the secret of, oh God, I have a crush on my male friend and I can't tell him because I'll get beat up. I didn't have that. And I think that we don't think that we would be able to relate on anything, is my guess. Does that sound possible?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, let me jump in on that. As a gay man, throughout most of my life, the vast majority of my male friends have been heterosexual men. And, we can go, we can cut up, we can have a good time. And with old friends who know that I'm gay, there's just not really an issue. If I am meeting a straight male now, my sexuality is, it doesn't come up in the conversation. We can cut up. We can have a really good time.
Hi, my name's Hugh. I'm gay.
Yes. So, I enjoy male bonding. I enjoy cutting up and the harassing and the just having fun. And there in me is always the fear of if they suddenly, when they find out that I am gay, is everything that we have developed as friends going to be shadowed or colored by their perspective. And I'm discovering more and more that it's not the case. We have a group of men, the generation a little younger than me. It's just not a huge issue, and they're like, and we're talking straight guys who are just like, okay, now can we go back to giving each other grief? It's really nice to see that emerging. I think as in my adolescence and my early adulthood, that was not the case. I think if a straight guy found out you were gay, they would instantly, oh no, I don't want to hang out with you. Whereas I think those same people now have evolved, have grown to the point of understanding it's a new world and I know who I am. You know what? I'm going to jump on that. I know who I am. The generation that I grew up with, men felt they had to prove who they are. And so they spent a lot of time working on proving that. Whereas I'm seeing that the younger generation is a lot more comfortable in their skin and don't feel that they have as much to prove as my generation did. Therefore, they're much more comfortable being around others who aren't like them, because me not being like them doesn't change who they are.
I think that if it's by the younger generation, you might mean my generation. But I'm 22. I think that there's a tendency to be more open-minded. I don't really expect my homosexuality to be much of an issue with anyone. I have found that there's just, when people don't know how to perceive you, they just tend to shy away, if that makes sense. Like trying to make friends with young men my age, like if I don't come out to them at all and they just, I don't say, hi, I'm gay and I'm trans, which I don't usually introduce myself like that. I think, like once, for a particular example, I met this guy at school and he was like 21 or something. I was making an assumption that he was gay, and I added him on Facebook, and I was correct, and he was really friendly with me. And I had him, we had each other on Facebook, and then after the next time I saw him, he just did not want to have anything to do with me. And I mean, so many people, I think, interpret I would characterize myself as effeminate, and I think they interpret that as left over from being born female, which is BS. And so sometimes I think, maybe he thought, that's a gay dude, and then, no, he's trans. So it's just, and people get confused. Am I making any sense at all with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask about that because, I know that's something you and I have talked about is, it being a weird place for society, not for you as a human being, because you're just expressing who you are. But, in the terms of how you navigate society, saying, yes, I am a man, I'm a gay man, and then expressing femininity in some way, or a feminine side, or being effeminate, because there are so many in society who will say exactly that thing that you just said, like, well, that's just left over from, being quote unquote born a girl. So I was going to ask you to expand on that a little bit.
Before Will expands on that, I want to ask a question. I struggle with, actually, I don't struggle with this. I don't really get how other people struggle with it, and that's my own naivete. What is masculine and what is feminine?
Well, right.
If you are a man and you are heterosexual and you like to knit, knitting is what a heterosexual man does. If you see my whole point, you can carry this
I think
many directions.
I think it's just more in terms of what society sees as masculine and feminine, not what actually is or is not.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know if masculine or feminine actually exists. I think we put definitions to those words as a culture.
Yeah. So, So going on, can you expand on that? Like, if you want to, express a part of yourself that's stereotypically feminine, like if you want to paint your nails or something like that. I mean, is that something that you hesitate sometimes because like people around you are just going to roll your eyes and be like, yeah, what's because you're trans, duh, not just because you're a man who's comfortable expressing that side of yourself?
Yeah, right now, actually, that's like the bane of my existence. I hesitate so much with gender expression. I paint my nails occasionally, and I'll go to work like with my nails painted, and I'll get misgendered, and I'm like, come on, guys, like you got it right yesterday. It's
right.
So frustrating.
You called me he yesterday, and I didn't correct you, so that means that.
Yeah, it's just silly. And I'm not out as trans at work, and so I think everyone's confused. But yes, it's knowing that trans men, I think, have to prove themselves twice as hard as cis men, and cis men already have to prove themselves a stupid, ridiculous amount as men. It's just exhausting, and sometimes I'm in these moods where I'm just like, screw it, and I just paint my nails and do whatever I want, and then I step out the front door, and all of a sudden I'm like terrified. So yeah, it's frustrating, and I think it's something that I'm going to have to get comfortable with and not waste any time waiting for the world to get okay with it.
That makes sense. Hugh, is that something that you struggle with? It kind of sounds like the answer to that question is no.
No, but there are certainly things. I am a sensitive person. I am a loving person, a caring person. I cry when I see, I can see two kids holding hands, and it'll make me cry. I can see a spider web and think it's the most beautiful creation on earth. So there's very much a sensitive artistic side to me. And I do know that in my younger years, in my youth, childhood and youth, I lived in a culture that questioned that and did question, is that masculine? And I just feel so totally blessed that I had someone come into my life who said, yeah, that's a man. I cry, I do all that. So there are a lot of qualities about me that some others may, that don't fit the absolute macho male stereotype. I definitely, I don't feel like I need to walk around all bucked up, and I am a relaxed person in my body. And I guess the thing for me, it's just been such a long journey and such a struggle reaching a place of being comfortable in my own skin. And I understand that for everyone, they are struggling with being comfortable in their skin, in their own skin. I think heterosexual men struggle being comfortable in their own skin because they too are given a list of criteria that they are supposed to conform to. And, heterosexual men also are now supposed to look like the cover of magazines. And the reality is most don't. The reality is most of us are average. Most of us have a little more weight than we should. Most of us have quirky parts of our personality that we hope no one else knows about. And this has nothing to do with sexuality or gender. It has to do with being human. And we all struggle with that. I think as I've gotten older, I've begun more and more to just say, okay, I am who I am. And in the process of getting comfortable with that, my self-image is a cisgender male who is gay. And that encompasses probably many things that others may perceive as feminine. I just perceive them as who I am. And I know heterosexual men who do many things that people perceive as feminine. And likewise, if we go back to my childhood, I come from country farming stock, and the women, I know some straight women in my family, and I have some straight female friends who can drive a tractor and bale hay and get out and do all of those things just because that was the social expectation for them, and they in no way perceive themselves to be anything less than fully woman. That's just their environment, how they grew up.
Another quick break, and we will be back with more Gaytheist Manifesto.
Today in school, I learned a lot. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me. In English, I learned that I'm disgusting. And in physics, I learned that I'm a loser.
Today in school, I learned that I'm ugly and useless. And in gym, I learned that I'm pathetic and a joke. In history, I learned that I'm trash.
Today in school, I learned that I have no friends. In English, I learned that I make people sick. And at lunch, I learned that I sit on my own because I smell. In chemistry, I learned that no one likes me.
In biology, I learned that I'm fat and stupid. And in math, I learned that I'm trash.
The only thing I didn't learn in school today?
The only thing I didn't learn today?
The only thing I didn't learn
is why no one ever helps.
Kids witness bullying every day. They want to help, but they don't know how. Teach them how to stop bullying and be more than a bystander at stopbullying.gov.
The staff of Secular Coalition for America lobbies U.S. Congress on issues of separation of church and state, and they've become a powerhouse for change in the United States government. You'll definitely want to subscribe to receive their email action alerts. These are updates for important issues and ones that you can get involved with directly. And hopefully, you'll consider making a contribution to the Secular Coalition for America to help them continue fighting for your equality. You can do it all at secular.org.
Okay, so let me ask this, and this is something that I've run into just from being trans and from being a queer woman, and I'm curious if this happens to either of you as well. So I'll be in the middle of a conversation with someone, and they'll say something maybe that makes sort of an unsaid assumption about me being straight, or something along those lines. And I've caught myself, because I'm at work or in another social situation where there's a lot of pressure, I've caught myself kind of just going along with it and not stopping and be like, yeah, that's not actually the whole story. I had some girl asked me if I had a boyfriend, and I just said no, instead of saying, well, actually I'm queer. I actually like girls more than I like guys. Instead of going into that conversation, I kind of just went along with it because of that pressure. And I'm wondering if either of you in conversations, either with other guys or just in general social situations, if that's a thing that you've experienced. Will, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Depending on the environment, the amount that I'll hesitate will vary. Like at work, I'm definitely way anxious about sharing anything like that. If I'm somewhere out of my comfort zone, let's say I'm just at school and not hanging out at a queer group or anything, I've noticed I am just way just not even wanting to talk about being trans or gay. And I think that's some of my own baggage. I think I don't feel comfortable doing that. I found that sometimes I just don't want to, because I feel like, as far as being gay specifically, it just feels too personal. And then I get annoyed because someone can say they're straight and they're not sharing any personal information. And it's frustrating that I can't be as open about that same area of my life without feeling like I might be sharing too much information,
Mm-hmm. And what about you, Hugh?
I will be quite honest. At work, I really do my best to keep my professional life and my personal life separate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't discuss a whole lot. And of course, I have been in situations where, if I'm around a colleague at work who is a straight male who will say something, and like did you watch such and such, or did you see her hot, or whatever, those typical male or stereotypical male comments. And in those, I usually just remain silent. And I've discovered that silence often says a lot, but it also doesn't say a lot. Silence says, this is a conversation that I don't want to have at work. Then they don't know if it's because for any other reason than I just don't want to have it at work. And, people ask me, colleagues usually don't ask a whole lot at work. We're professional. It's very interesting, though, that, people will talk about their families. They'll talk about their children. They'll talk about what they did. And I usually don't add a whole lot to that conversation until I get to know you. And on a professional level at work, it usually takes me about a year before I will say something like, well, this weekend, my spouse and I.
Right.
And by that time, we live in the 21st century and they figured it out.
Right.
So and they are probably saying, okay, you can say he, but they honor the fact that I'm at work and I don't want to go there professionally. And it's the unspoken code that we all have. Everyone in the room knows, but we just officially on the professional level don't discuss it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because a lot of times it's just as simple as, because in a professional environment, obviously you're not going to be diving super deep into the, sort of details of someone's life. But, obviously, like, somebody's going to ask you, do you have a girlfriend? Are you married? Do you have kids? Like, that's like normal everyday kind of, conversation stuff. Mm-hmm. And answering those questions can force you to out yourself, and not answering those questions can make people ask even more questions. So.
Well, when people ask me, do I have children? I will, and if I don't know them very well, I will often say no, or I will say that was not an option for us. And it wasn't.
Fair enough.
Of course, and how they read that is up to them,
right?
Because there are many reasons why married couples cannot have children. Just at work, I prefer to keep it professional. That's and I am in academia, and as an academic, we intellectually challenge ideas. And one of the great things about teaching is that when I'm teaching my classes, my job is to be neutral, and I do my best to always remain neutral and to just say, well, some people believe this group thinks this. What do you think about this? What are your thoughts? So it's that whole Socratic approach, which allows me to remain neutral, unopinioned, but I am challenging them to form their opinions, which ultimately I think, teaching is really about helping people discover how to think critically and think for themselves. And it's not so much about information, because we live in a world where, Callie, ask me any question and give me 1 minute and I will find the answer for you, using my phone.
Right.
However, once I get that information, what am I supposed to do with it? And so as an academic, I'm able to do a little mental jousting and remain neutral and never express my opinion.
Gotcha. Okay. And so because we're having a conversation about masculinity and masculine stereotypes, we kind of had to go here at some point. So something that'll often come up in groups of guys, and I remember this from before I came out, so is talk about sex and sharing sexual experiences and that kind of thing. So, Will, starting with you, is that a thing that you experience coming up, and how do you navigate that when it does?
So in the past, yes. And by in the past, I mean probably when I was in college and hanging out with those guys who were, quote unquote, helping me into manhood and all that. Now I do not, I don't have the opportunity to even learn how to navigate that. I don't find myself in a lot of just socially conversations with guys. I think part of that is I think we're both avoiding each other. I think I'm incredibly shy, and I think I don't give off the vibe that maybe would make it, and I'm trying really hard on stereotypes, but let's say a typical cis guy approach me in a friendly friendship, let's bro out kind of manner. So yeah, I don't actually have a lot of experience with that one.
Because I've caught myself, I'm generally speaking, like, we don't talk about it much on the show because we like to be PG-13, but generally speaking, I'm a pretty open book about sexuality. And I've found myself when I'm hanging out with people that I work with or something like that after work, and the conversations go there and everybody's being just super like real about their sexual experiences. Like, that's an impulse that I have because I'm not ashamed of sexuality, and I'm not ashamed of being a sexual person and enjoying sex and all that sort of stuff. But I find myself hesitating to share experiences with them, because I'm fairly certain that most of them don't know that I'm trans because they've said certain things that I don't think they would say in front of me if they knew. But what about you, Hugh? Like, and this is like speaking outside of, job conversations or anything like that, but just kind of like everyday hanging out.
I have always been one who feels that you have quality, not quantity. And when it comes down, I have many, many acquaintances. When it comes down to really close friends, I'm not sure I feel more than one hand, maybe two. There's probably an inner circle of 5 and maybe an outer circle of 10, making a total of 15. And within that circle, there are a variety of perspectives and genders and orientations. And within that inner circle of people, if they ask me a question, I'm pretty comfortable with answering it honestly. But I don't find myself really having a lot of conversations like that. I recently was able to see a roommate of mine from my undergrad, who is straight male, married, 3 kids, and we knew each other in undergrad, and I was experimenting with my sexuality. He was aware of that. He didn't have an issue with it. And we've talked in great detail. So he is probably the one heterosexual male that I've shared pretty intimate details about things. And of course, with us, it was just, I think it was 2 guys talking. Now, when I was, exploring my sexuality and doing my best to be straight, I would discuss issues and experiences that I had with women with my male friends as well. At this stage in my life, it's just not a topic that I go to very much. Now, the flip side of that is Callie, I have grown to know you. You are to me in that inner circle of my family. I would never discuss intimate details on the podcast. Of course, you've not asked me to do that.
Right.
But if you and I were talking privately, and you asked me very intimate detail, I would be comfortable telling you truthfully and honestly in detail about that, because you and I also are friends who understand that we're on journeys, and I think part of understanding your own journey is the process of understanding someone else's, and you've got to be open to that. And so I would be comfortable discussing those things with you in private. And there are several people that would. It just honestly, and you and I actually have, I recall one conversation.
Yeah, we've done that before.
that we had that was pretty informational and educational.
That is a fantastic way of putting that.
To both of us. And so I'm comfortable with that, but honestly, I've got to really be comfortable with someone to be open to a conversation of that level. And I know this is fanboy time, but it is just truly a privilege and an honor that you are one of the persons that are in that circle. And I feel privileged to have you at that place in my heart.
Oh, you're gonna make me cry. So, and back at you, by the way, like all of that stuff you just said about me, back at you, for time's sake.
Well, thank you. And to quote a dear friend of mine, you're going to make me cry.
So, as we wrap up here, Will, I know I said it once before. I asked, if there was anything we hadn't covered that you thought might be important. So I'll ask that again. To give both of you a chance to throw stuff out there. So, Will, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think is important to point out surrounding male experience, trans male experience, trans gay male experience, so on?
Oh gosh, there's probably a lot, but I do want to say that as far as the last question we asked, actually, I did think of something else that I wanted to say about
yeah, go for it.
Okay, as far as, being open about sexuality and stuff, even casual conversation, whatever, as a trans person, when you have to educate your doctor on things
right.
in that it just conversations aren't casual and fun. It becomes if a bunch of friends are talking about that topic and then you decide to share, and then all of a sudden it becomes you have to educate them on how trans people do things and how you personally choose to do things, and then you're talking
right.
about dysphoria, and then it's like, oh gosh, this isn't fun. So
right.
Yeah, it's really limiting. It's
I
really
made it awkward. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's just one of those things that being trans does, it has an impact on, and this one isn't so fun. But yeah, it's just there's just a lot of educating that comes with any conversation, and it's kind of a bummer, if you want to be open and share things, and even just you have to censor a lot, and not just about sexuality. Just as a person, I've found that in forming relationships with people, I have to censor a lot, and I have to decide, am I ready for this conversation? I know they're going to ask this question if I say this thing. Am I in a place where I can talk about this? I know they will trigger me. Can I deal with that? And it's really, really hard sometimes.
Yeah. And what about you, Hugh? Was there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you think is important to point out?
With the topic of this segment being masculinity, as a man, I continue daily to discover a definition of who I am and what I am and what defines me. And I think often we gender conformists, we what's the word I'm looking for? Help me. We oh, come on.
Binary?
Well, we non-binary. I don't want
no.
we folks who do not conform with
gender and sexual norms. We'll put it that way.
Thank you. That's what I was trying to say. I think often we assume that we have a struggle with our sexuality, and we have a struggle with our gender and how we define ourselves in that. And I think, often assume that heterosexual men and heterosexual women, they just come prepackaged, ready to rock and roll, ready to go, and they have their act totally together. And we assume that we are different and they just have it together. We look at them, they look like they they know all the answers. Everything is great. Everything is grand. I think as a human, and this is where I have to break down that barrier of male, female, straight, gay, and all of the various and very subtle colors between that, and realize that what we actually are is human. And if I understand I am struggling, I have to understand that those around me are struggling. And I remember having a conversation years ago. There was a male who said that, some other males were picking on him, and we discussed it, we processed it. And one of the things that I walked away from was realizing that those straight men were also figuring out who they were and figuring out who they were not at the same time. As we figure out who we are, we also figure out who we are not. And I think often we members of the LGBTQ, RSTUVWXYZ community forget that the one letter that comes before all of those is H. And as H's, we all share a very similar struggle. We all are trying to figure out what masculinity is. Women are figuring out what their level of masculinity is. Cisgender men are figuring out what their level of masculinity is. Gay men are figuring out what their level of masculinity is. All of us are figuring out our masculinity, because the initial that in the process of us dividing ourselves into, I'm lesbian, I'm straight, I'm transgendered female, and I like men, and so forth and so on. I'm black, I'm white, I'm Christian, I'm Muslim, I'm atheist. We are so busy dividing ourselves that we forget that the one letter in our whole alphabet is the H, and it's that we are human. And as human beings, we all are trying to figure out what it is. And so instead of us saying this is, as a gay man, my struggle with figuring out what it is to be a man, I think all of us are doing that. And we forget that there are so many parts of our journey that we can share with others. There's so many commonalities that we share with every different group. And we are so focused on those things that separate us that we forget that the vast majority of things about all of us are very, very similar, including our struggle with sexuality and our struggle with femininity and our struggle with masculinity. We are all in this together. We are all trying to figure it out. We are all on a journey. And we often forget that every other person we come in contact with is also trying to figure it out too. And if we can look at the world and understand that, yeah, I feel confused sometimes. I don't fit in sometimes. I'm struggling to figure out where I am. But every single person around us is doing the same thing. And if we can just find something that connects us, that is what we miss out. We miss out on our H, which is our humanity.
Wow. That was quite a speech. I enjoyed that.
I did mention I was raised a Southern Baptist preacher's child.
Fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. It does come out sometimes.
And
sorry about that.
No, you're fine. It was good. And so you kind of preempted my last question. And Will, I know I've talked to you about this before, and Hugh, I know you know this. So, typically we end the show with a segment where we talk about being a better ally. And basically that whole last speech, I feel like was kind of a be a better ally. So Will, speaking from your perspective, if you could, what can people do better to be more understanding and to be a better ally to folks specifically in your situation?
To specifically gay trans men?
Or as a trans man, as a man, as a, whatever.
As a human.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I think that for me, I would love to see kind of echoing what Hugh said, but more of just maybe some redefining of what masculinity and femininity is, or some just less value being placed on the definitions that we have of masculinity and femininity. I think that if people were able to take a step back and reassess why they're valuing the specific traits so much, if they see a person who doesn't fit the standard that they have and that bothers them, I think we just need to pause and stop and think. And I think less value, less importance being placed on those traits would make a lot of people a lot happier and a lot more relaxed. And I think, that's what I would like to see.
Kind of the idea that it would relieve pressure on a lot of people, because as a guy that likes to paint your nails, you talked earlier about how that makes you nervous, and it's not because you're unsure of yourself or you're unsure of who you are, is because you know how other people are going to react to those things. So, it's not a will problem. It's a society's reaction to will problem.
Yes, exactly.
So so sort of breaking down the idea that those things are so rigid and so important, and that, it's okay for boys to play with Barbies, and it's okay for girls to play with Transformers, and, and that whole thing. Yeah. And I feel like,
exactly.
And I feel like these ally segments usually turn into kind of what Hugh was talking about, because if you go back and listen to, everything that we've ever said, it's we could call the segment "How to Not Be a Dick," because it's really just about, it's just really about learning about, people's unique life experiences and how that colors the way they interact with the world, and, sort of understanding that, not trying to erase those differences, because those differences do exist and they are important, but erasing the importance, and the stigma surrounding those differences, and learning to celebrate those things. You're a guy who loves to paint his nails. That's freaking cool. I like that, because that's different. And, as opposed to men don't do that, or you're a trans man, so that must just be leftover femininity or something like that. Just accepting things and people as they are.
Absolutely.
If I can jump in on if someone were to ask me, how can I be a better ally to you? My response would be, I am gay, I am male, and those two characteristics of the many that I could use to describe me are definitely on the list. Where they are on the list varies from day to day, from hour to hour, from moment to moment. And what I hope to get from other people is just get to know me. Take the time to get to know me. Make no assumptions about anything, because I am, yes, probably all of the above at some time and some point, because there's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth. There's a spectrum, and we slide on that spectrum all the time. So if you want to be my ally as a gay man, just come up and talk to me, and just treat me like you would treat anyone else. Ask me stupid questions, tell dumb jokes, and don't be offended if I don't find one of them funny. And just treat me like anybody else. I am not special at all.
Oh, stop it.
But I have a follow-up to this. I am not special at all. I am average, absolutely just like any other human. Nothing special about me. And at the same time, I am the only me on this planet today, which makes me the most special me that could ever exist. So treat me like that. Treat me like I'm not special at all, like I am just anybody, as if I'm every man and yet at the same time treat me like I am the one very special jewel that exists on this planet that will never be here again.
Well, that's perfect. Well, I want to thank both of you for taking the time. I know you both got a lot going on and you're super busy. So thank you so much for being on the show, for giving me your time, and for being super honest and open. I really, really appreciate both of you.
Thank you, Callie.
It is an honor as always, always an honor. And thank you very much for the privilege of being able to have a voice, because what you have become for many of us is a voice that every week I listen to and I say, yes, that's what I would have said. And you're being a voice for many of us is greatly appreciated, and you're giving many of us the opportunity to use our own voice in ways that I've never used my voice personally before is honor, privilege, and I am most grateful to you for that opportunity.
And that, my friends, is going to do it for this episode of the Gaytheist Manifesto on Secular Media Network. Big thanks again to both of my guests, Hugh and Will. You can find the show on Facebook at facebook.com/thegaytheistmanifesto. You can email us at thegaytheistmanifesto@gmail.com. I'm on Twitter at GaytheistCallie, and you can find the show on Twitter at TheGaytheists. Before we go, I want you to know that if you're lost, you're hurting, you're scared, if you feel like no one cares and no one understands, you need to know there's a community out here that loves you, cares for you, and knows that you're capable of amazing things and that you are worthy of love. If you're struggling, please don't be afraid to reach out. Until next time, friends, this is the Gaytheist Manifesto.